Shigaraki vs Mahito came out and I quite liked it. Not gonna have a super long preamble for this one, let's just get right into what I thought. I loved the rundowns a shocking amount. I say shocking because these aren't characters I really care about. I'm only caught up to season 4 of Hiroaka, and the League of Villain stuff was always the less interesting aspect of the show to me. And while I enjoyed Mahito in this whole season of Jujutsu Kaisen that I've seen, he didn't make as much of an impression on me as many of the other characters. Hell, this episode happening is the main reason I even remember his name. I am getting better at that with JJK though. I have finally committed Narumi's name to memory. Love that guy, hope nothing bad happens to him. So with this little investment, the fact that I was as hooked as I was on both of them is a testament to how good Liam's script is. It really sold me on Shigaraki as this edgelord who thinks he's hot shit but is so socially inept that he can't lead others to save his life. And Mahito is this sadistic, cruel bastard who's completely flippant with the value of life, until his own being at risk knocks some perspective into him. Both are paced flawlessly with switching between story and versus stuff, and I really like how the relations to the rivals are gone over. Shigaraki and Deku carrying on their mentor's feud, and how Mahito may have lost in the end, but left a mark on Yuji by destroying his youthful optimism. Mahito got the more compelling points of discussion in that regard for me, but the difference in the characters gives Shigaraki another advantage. His origin story is naturally much more tragic and compelling. Some lines at the start, like the only open hand that reached out belonged to the devil, and except for dear old dad, that one was intentional, go insanely hard. And the way they managed to bring it around full circle at the very end with Deku being the one to finally try and save him, giving him a hero to look out for him even if it was a little too late, is the single most emotionally resonant ending to any death battle rundown. It made Shigaraki seem far more interesting as a character than any other time I've ever heard people talk about him. And if I do ever pick Hiroaka back up, I'll be disappointed if he isn't as good as this made him seem to be. I've been told by some that he isn't, others say he is. I have no idea whose word to take, so I'll just have to wait and see, I guess. This is what lets it stand out as my preferred of the two rundowns, and one of my favourites in the show's history. Not to say it's flawless, I think the two different introductions of Decay could have maybe been tweaked a little to more naturally lead into each other instead of wording the second one like it was something new he unlocked after his name change. Hi, I'm recording this bit 2 days later after being given a bit more context. Chat, he doesn't know, point and laugh at him. I still don't know the entire context, but I've been told enough to get the impression that this criticism is kind of void now, so just pretend I didn't say anything. Okay, back to 2 days ago me. And the jokes were definitely not all winners. The unironic okay then, and the new name for the boom dick are the first to come to mind in that regards. They're balanced out though by the pointing and laughing at Tomura's edgelord cringeite behaviour. It's not an episode that's really aiming to be super funny, so that's hardly a major point of criticism. Mojitos doesn't have any writing baggage to me. My only slight grievance has been flip-flopping on which way he wants Wiz to pronounce the guy's name, but that one's really just a matter of which syllable he emphasizes, and it might have been to allow some sentences to flow a bit better. Either way, I don't find it too bothersome. Also, the editing. How does DJ do it? Like, actually, what is this witchcraft that I'm watching unfold in front of my eyes? Easily up there as one of the best in that regards. Billcord and Bowsegg still hold the advantage to me due to the variety of ways they had to get creative with the visuals across different mediums, but I think this might be as close as any other episode gets to holding its own with them. This momentum of incredible quality is not going to slow down going into the animation because, good lord, it's peak, it's yummers, it's glummy, it's all of the positive adjectives. The setup wastes no time. It quickly manages to establish them both in a more alive-feeling crossover world thanks to the inclusion of civilians. Shigaraki gets the near-death experience with Mahito using Idol Transfiguration, but the danger sense kicks in and a vestige takes the hit instead, and a combination of those things allow him to see Mahito for the rest of the battle to work around that potential issue. One small detail I really like that it took me a few rewatches to pick up on is that several future hits also show other vestiges breaking away to emphasize certain impacts, and establish that Mahito's managing to chip away at the collective shield the more attacks he lands, even if they aren't always shown, then later destroying multiple at once with the Smash Ultimate KO spark. The first one you can also tell by the scars, the guy with the danger sense quirk, which explains why it doesn't show up again for the rest of the fight. And the clashing of the hands during the domain expansion with the vestiges trying to prop up Shigaraki's own hands but failing and getting destroyed in the process, god, it's so cool. The most obvious thing to compliment is the look of the animation. Moro's an animator I primarily associate with cartoon scrunklies thanks to both Bowser vs Eggman and Indie Cross, so this initially seemed very out of his comfort zone, but damn, he pulled it off. The characters look great in his style, all very expressive with great body language when they're standing still, and very fluid for the most part when they move. The weakest part to me is probably Shigaraki getting ganged up on by the clones on the train tracks, but even then I'd hardly say it looks outright bad. Pretty much every shot is just Moro flexing his talents and it's glorious. One thing he didn't have to flex though was drawing hands. The civilians at the start were drawn by his sister, which makes sense in retrospect retrospect, given the noticeably different way they're drawn. Still amazing, obviously. And then after all that, all the hands are 3D models. Understandable, because if I could draw and someone asked me to animate this in 2D, I would never speak to them again. In fact, a lot of things in this animation use 3D models, which are blended in pretty seamlessly. I only noticed some like the Nomus upon a rewatch, and I'm sure that there are still more that I haven't picked up on yet. The only one where it was glaringly obvious was the big hand-hulk Shigaraki, but given the naturally uneven way the form is designed with so many outlines, it was never going to blend in as naturally as something like Fury Bowser could do. The actual fighting on display here is really cool. Since this was a battle more focused on their powers than stats, we get to see that reflected in the creativity of how they fight. Mahito brings out the clones, regenerates, shapeshifts himself in really weird ways, turns the Nomus into puddles that he fires out like a laser. He gets to do plenty on top of the standard melee fighting you'd expect. I initially wasn't too into his transformation to the instant body of distorted killing, but the more I reflect on it, the big mass of flesh turning into the form within the few frames of the darkness flashing is actually really sick. It's a really cool callback to what they showed in his rundown without doing the exact same thing. Shigaraki also gets to do a lot. On top of using decay, he gets the big Kamehameha, summoning the Nomus, which I didn't expect but was very happy to see, big sonic shockwave jump, his own grotesque shapeshifting, and firing out big blasts of flesh. He utilized a solid amount of his quirks while delivering on the body horror aspect of his toolkit that I find really gross but also kinda cool to see used here. Considering they still have to work within the YouTube community guidelines, I think they pushed the grotesqueness of it decently far. The verbal dynamic the two have is also super entertaining. Shigaraki has his usual I think I'm him persona going on, while Mahito's having the absolute time of his life not taking Shiggy seriously until bro realizes he isn't built for this and flees at the first sign of danger. Their banter delivers on everything I'd want. This isn't the same one-liner machine as our previous episode, but it still has plenty of memorable and quotable lines. I love Mahito calling the game over line lame, the running bit where they talk like this is Mahito's audition for the League of Legends with the super funny did I get the part to close off, and of course the ending monologues. We're not done with all the dialogue discussion before we head over to that ending though. The voice actors for this episode give it their all. King or Digital Circus makes Mahito sound every bit as simultaneously playful, deranged, and creepy as I could hope for, then dropping all of it for that cold as fuck domain expansion to really let it hit. And Shigaraki, what more can be said about Tom Schalk at this point other than he's probably one of the best voice actors Death Battle have ever hired. The man never misses no matter what kind of performance he needs to give, and it's no different here. He's got the raspiness and demeanor down pat, making Tomura sound like an absolute loser. There's a complimentary in parentheses at the end of that sentence. I can totally buy that this is the guy with an unironic gamers don't die they respawn case for his phone. And for our final few straggler points before the end while we're on the topic of audio, the sound design is great, lots of gross squelchy noises that stand out from most other episodes, and the track is pretty good. Not really as much of my thing on its own, though I do still like it, but it works great in the context of this fight thanks to its pace and consistently high level of energy, except for the brief cut to let the domain expansion hit even more. Alright, yeah, we can talk about the ending now. Maybe one of the greatest of all time? The fight on the train is awesome, and Shigaraki's Is That All You Got being met with easily my preferred of the two domain expansions on the show so far is one of my favourite sequences we've had in a while. Then after Mahito tries to deconstruct Shiggy to torment him before closing in for the kill, he finds himself confronted by All For One's Vestige doing the goddamn Sukuna pose before telling him to piss off and not ruin the body he's been building for himself to take over for years. This is one of my favourite references in the entire show. I'm so happy they call back to probably the highlight of JJK Season 1 for me. It's so naturally worked in, and feels like one of the most oh that's so obvious how did I never think of that kind of interactions you could have done. All For One looks incredibly intimidating, and his sheer power is felt by how he immediately folds Mahito's armoured body that Shigaraki could only destroy small parts of previously. I don't know if I'm quite feeling the line read as much. I might just be surprised at how British he sounds. I haven't watched the dub of Hiroaka, but that speaks more to how phenomenal the rest of the scenes surrounding it is. Now that Mahito is well and truly fucked, we get a nice extended death sequence as Shigaraki decays the entire tunnel around them as Mahito does the funny Spider-Verse run to try and get away. But no matter how many tricks he pulls, death catches up to him eventually as Shigaraki's able to get his hands on his goofy little running head and smash him into dust. His final line being to reply to Mahito's grow up with you grow up is so perfect, because it sounds cool following his previous monologue, while also being a fittingly childish way for him to clap back with a no you. Now that the comparison's been drawn by my good friend Fortnite Winwood, I will never not think of this Gordon Ramsay clip every time I rewatch this bit of the fight. Wake up! You wake up! The ending shot maybe gets cut off a little abruptly since the music is still winding down, down really feels like a line from Shiggy is missing there. Otherwise, I have no real problems with this ending. It's easily among the best that Death Battle have ever done. Conclusion was quite interesting too. I love fights that can manage to be interesting by focusing on powers clashing rather than raw stats being the sole deciding factor, and this one was certainly interesting to see the comparisons drawn. Very simple when it's all laid out in front of you, but I like seeing it get laid out in the first place. So that was Shigaraki vs Mahito, an episode I didn't have as much to say on as some other episodes, but I wanted to say it anyway because it was almost all positive. The easiest way for me to summarize how much I like this episode is the fact that this review even exists at all. I've said already, but I'm not going to be giving each Death Battle a standalone review like I used to. A lot of them are going to have to wait for their respective season rankings. I really want this channel to be able to branch out. I've got a lot of videos I want to make on my other interests, and only so much time to work on them. So I'll be a lot more picky-choosy with which Death Battle episodes I decide to put that time in for. It either has to be one I have a lot of prior investment in, or something I feel strongly enough about, with my schedule at the time permitting, of course. And this episode being one of those kind of boggles my mind. I was interested enough upon its announcement in the Kickstarter lineup, but it was easily the reveal there that made the least impression on me. My gut feeling was to expect a relatively middle-of-the-road, bog-standard anime battle, since this wasn't some long-lasting rivalry or massively discussed matchup that I'd ever seen, and it wasn't with characters that I cared about, so I didn't have any reason to expect a banger of this caliber. Then it was announced Moro was animating it, which was the real sitting up in the chair moment, and now here we are. Out of the 3 episodes we have so far this year, this is pretty handedly my favourite. For the overall independent era, Bowser vs Eggman still holds complete dominance, and I'd even say I clicked with Among Us vs Fall Guys a good bit more, but Shigaraki vs Mahito has a commanding lead over everything else right now, which is saying a lot given how fantastic Ghost Rider vs Spawn was. It's an outstanding episode, I absolutely loved it, and I can't believe I'm saying that. Easily the most I've been pleasantly blindsided by an episode's quality since Sauron vs Lich King. It still has room to be topped, but assuming there are 12 episodes to release this year, I will be stunned if this somehow doesn't make the top 3. Alright, that's about all I got for today. There are several other videos I have planned for this month, so I should probably get to those sometime soon. Hope you enjoyed this review, go watch Nem's one as well, see you around.
Genuinely, you can make the argument Wesker wins now.